Good morning, friends and enemies. This is the game-by-game wide receiver fantasy preview. We are bucketing every single fantasy-relevant wide receiver for Week 15 into a must-start, strong start, dub flex, L flex, or cone bucket. We did yesterday's video, which was the running back version of this. So if you missed that, go check it out. We will start from the very top. We have the Rams in San Francisco tonight with a 50-point total, so we are expecting some fireworks. However, we don't need fireworks in order for you to cash on Underdog Fantasy because they have a free square for you, 0.5 passing yards. If Matt Stafford has one single passing yard in tonight's game, you're going to win on Underdog Fantasy. All you have to do is download the app, use code BDGE when you deposit $10, just $10 or more. You're going to get a deposit bonus, plus you'll get the free square to start you off in the right direction. He's going to go over a yard, and that's because he's got some pass catchers in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. We're obviously not going to overthink those two. Both of those are going to fall right into the must-start categories. Behind them, you have Demarcus Robinson, who was DMP Monday and Tuesday. Got back to a limited practice on Wednesday with a shoulder AC joint, little injury. Game time decision for whether or not he is going to play. I don't feel great about that on a short week, so Robinson would fall into the L-Flex category. If he does not play, then I think Tutu Atwell maybe get some L-Flex consideration, but I don't think you're trying to start him in your fantasy playoffs. San Francisco on the other side, some moving parts here for sure. Ricky Pearsall has gone straight cone on us, so he's a cone regardless of who is in the lineup, who's not in the lineup. Brock Purdy has looked a little bit healthier. He's been throwing the ball a little bit more, so I feel a lot more confident in the pass catchers for San Fran, more specifically. Juwan Jennings is going to be a strong start for me. He just dominates targets in this offense and looks like the best receiver by a wide margin on that side of things. All right, so you got Juwan Jennings in the strong start category. At this point, Deebo Samuel, it's not even like the squeaky wheel narrative. He is just not a part of this offense right now. So with Deebo, it's crazy because if you look on Underdog, the lines that they have for Deebo are still at like 4.5 receptions, 49 receiving yards, and I'm like, that's an auto lower, right? Like you have to put the mortgage on it. Soon as every single person has to starts thinking that way, that's when he goes higher on those. So I'm not going to put anything on the lines there on Underdog along with the free square, but I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to go with the same game slip there where you took the Matt Stafford 0.5 passing yards and then Deebo Samuel lower than 4.5 receptions, which feels a little bit locky, but Deebo for me is going to be an L flex. Of course, he's always capable of having the big game, but he has done nothing over the last month and a half of the season to make you feel like he's anything more than just a scratch-off lotto ticket. Like, sure, you can hit and win $100, $500, $1,500, but realistically, you're probably getting $3 or you just wasted $5 on the ticket. So we're going to move on from that game. We have Washington and New Orleans. Washington, 7.5-point favorites on the road in New Orleans. Now, kind of interesting, little narrative here is that Marshawn Lattimore, who was traded from the Saints to the Commanders, looks ready to suit up for his first game here. Not that it really matters because the Saints don't have Shaheed or Chris Olave, and they have a backup quarterback in Jake Haener and or Spencer Rattler. I don't even know who's starting at this point. I've just paid so little attention to this offense because I don't want to start anyone. MVS would be an L flex for me. I would not start any other wide receiver in New Orleans. For Washington, Terry McLaurin is obviously a must start. Top 5 fantasy wide receiver on the year. Behind him, Noah Brown is hurt. There's not another wide receiver that I'm looking to get into my lineup from Washington. We can move right along to Cincinnati and Tennessee. Cincinnati is in Tennessee. Damn near a 47-point total in this one. Obviously, Cincinnati just bleeds points to opposing teams. Still don't know that I love a point total that high. Regardless, Jamar Chase must start. T. Higgins, bad game last week, but he's been pretty much bulletproof up to this point in the season. He's going to be a must-start as well. On the Tennessee side of things, we're looking at Calvin Ridley. We're looking at Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Coming off his first game in which he did not score a touchdown. The matchup's obviously juicy. Had he scored a touchdown last week, we'd probably be still looking at him in the dub flex category. And I still think he borders. I still think he's someone that you could absolutely play this week. Obviously, there are no teams on a bye, so you've got your team at full strength most likely going into the playoffs. And if you are a playoff team, you probably have better options than Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but he might have helped you get here. So you might be debating it. Obviously I'm starting Ridley over Nick Westbrook. He's obviously cooled down a little bit since that streak in the middle of the season where he, went bonkers and started to put up 20 fantasy points per game there. Cooled off a little bit, but he's still, for the most part, putting up a floor of somewhere between 5 to 7 receptions. So I still feel really good about Calvin Ridley in this matchup as a strong start. strong total here in this game. So Ridley's going to be a strong start for me. NWI, he's bordering between dub and L flex. I think I'd rather lean elsewhere, obviously, because we saw what his floor was last week. And it's not like his ceiling is super, super high. He's kind of like a dude who can score a touchdown and still really not hit a ceiling game for you. And when you have players like that, I'd shy away from getting into my lineup because the risk factor with like floor to ceiling combo to me is not worth the squeezing the juice there is just not worth it for me. I don't think the margarita is going to come out as tasty as we want it to be. So he's going to fall into an L flex category for me. I still think he's usable if you need, but I don't feel great about it. Moving now to Miami and Houston. This game is in Houston. Houston is 3-point favorites, 47-point total here for Houston. Nico Collins is obviously a must start. I don't really feel good about anybody else. Tank Dell has I don't know what happened with Tank Dell, man, but the discourse this summer is going to be out of control. They're just going to be talking about how, he got shot and he had these injuries and whatnot. And, like, I guess I just feel like his separation skills have not been there. And yeah, there obviously has to be some of that attributed to it because he looks so good as a rookie and then his separation skills have just completely fucking fallen off the map. So I do lean more so the fact that, like, the injuries and all the preseason stuff definitely affected him more than just having a sophomore slump here. That being said, though, you cannot trust Tank Dell. So to be honest with you, even in a relatively good matchup with a high total here, Tank Dell is probably closer to a cone than even an L flex for me at this point. On the flip side, you've got Tyreek Hill, who I still think is a strong start as opposed to a must start. He had a good game last week, and he's been a little bit hot. Like Tua, since he's come back from the concussion, has put up crazy statistical numbers. Some of them have been real. Some of them have been him playing really well. Others have been more like garbage time, third and fourth quarter, putting up empty statistics. Last week, Tyreek had a good game, caught a touchdown, but it was like off of a tip pass. Feels like a lot of fluky things are kind of just like adding up for them right now. But again, he's Tyreek Hill. You kind of ride that wave. So he's going to be whatever. He's going to be a must start. You're not sitting Tyreek Hill at this point. Jalen Waddle has been significantly better since like Tua's return from the concussion. Last 3 weeks in PPR, he has scored 20.9, 11.3, and 28.4. And that's wildly significant because basically the last 10 games prior to that, he was held under 9 PPR fantasy points. So we're talking about a lot more production. My concern for this matchup in particular is that Miami might be without both of their starting offensive tackles, Teron Armstead and Kendall Lamb. They were both DNPs on Wednesday. Obviously, you've got a few more days for them to start getting limited practices back in and getting onto the field. But if both of them are out against this edge rush from Houston, that's going to cause problems for Tua and the amount of pressure that he's going to get. And he's so great at getting the ball out quickly, but I don't think it's going to give time for plays downfield to Jalen Waddle to develop here. And I think that's going to lead to a lot more of what we've already seen this season in Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith getting a ton of really, really quick targets to get the ball out of Tua's hand very quickly. So that's my ultimate concern for a dude like Jalen Waddle this week. And because of that, he's still playable, but I'm going to put him into the L flex category because transparently, I just don't feel great about him, right? If I have him in my lineup, that's the difference between dub flex and L flex. They're both flexible players. One I feel good about, the other I don't. And Jalen Waddle, listen, he's been good recently, but based on what he's shown us the entire season, based on what we've seen from this offense the entire season, and based on what the matchups are going to be for this particular week, I'm going to throw him closer to the L flex category than the dub flex category. Moving on to KC and Cleveland. Kansas City on the road, 4-point favorites, 45 total here. Cleveland, as you could see, is not a good pass defense by any stretch of the imagination, and 27th in coverage rank per PFF, the 8th most fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position with Jameis. They're throwing the ball more. They're putting up more points. The other teams are putting up more points. KC's pass defense hasn't been great. Their EPA per pass rank is 24th, as you can see down below. There's just not a lot of greatness going on here on defense. We'll put it that way. From the KC side of things, you've got Xavier Worthy, where you're starting to see this like school of thought going around the fantasy industry. Like, oh, he's got like such a good floor. He's catching 4 to 5 passes a game. It's not really amounting to anything for you for fantasy. And yeah, sure, he can rip a big play, and maybe this is the week that he does it, but they have not connected all year. I don't know why this week would be the week that you want to gamble on that in your fantasy playoffs. So Worthy, sure, he's got like a decent PPR floor. He's going to go into the L flex category. DeAndre Hopkins, however, he continues to play well. Like, we're not seeing a ton of upside from him, but he continues to be like a really, really real red zone option for him. And he's scoring touchdowns, even though he's not seeing like a ton of targets or receptions here. He is still his first read, Mahomes' first read on like third downs and important situations when he needs to go to an outside wide receiver. So D-Hop's going to be a dub flex. Worthy's going to be an L flex. Not starting anybody else in that receiver core, obviously. Hollywood Brown expected back next week, the week after that at the latest. So, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. For Cleveland, Cedric Tillman, limited practice on Wednesday. Still waiting for him to clear this concussion protocol. So I don't know that I have any sort of updated news for you here. Jerry Jeudy has been red hot. The guy just continues to put up elite numbers. So at this point, I don't really know. Outside of the name cachet, putting him into the strong start category feels a little bit fraudulent. So I think we're just going to have to put Jerry Jeudy right into the must-start category. Elijah Moore, I feel relatively okay about. He's obviously shown a low floor, but in games where it's a good passing environment, in games where Jameis Winston is throwing the ball 40-plus times a game, Elijah Moore, more often than not, is going to give you a floor of like 6 for 60. So I think he's a dub flex in this game. If you are leaning more towards, like if you're in a league that's half PPR standard, obviously he starts to drift more towards the L flex category. But if you're in a full PPR league, I feel okay about having Elijah Moore in my flex category. If Tillman plays, I don't know what we're going to see from the two of them. Jerry Jeudy is still going to be more so in the strong start category. He's still someone I definitely want to my lineup, but I do think the targets get a little bit more dispersed, and we don't know, can't really predict who's going to have the ceiling game in any particular week there. So if Tillman ends up clearing, it's probably going to move Tillman and Elijah Moore into the L-Flex category. Not that I necessarily don't want to play them, but it obviously makes it a little bit more murky. So it's going to be Jeudy, Tillman, Elijah Moore in that order. Moving down to Dallas and Carolina. So we have Carolina as favorites here at home. This is going to be a game where I'm assuming both teams will really rely on their ground game to get things going here. Maybe Jalen Coker is back for the Carolina Panthers, which makes things pretty messy overall. When we look at the receivers, though, you're probably, in your fantasy playoffs, you're not going to get any of those dudes into your lineup. Leggett has had a lot of opportunities, getting a lot of separation as a receiver, so it's like good to see as a rookie. The dude has literal fucking nubs for hands, though. He would be having a great, low-key, like a great rookie season if he could have hauled in any of the 7 passes that I've watched him drop throughout the year. There's pretty much once a week he drops a 30 to 40-yard pass over the course of the season, which would be an extra 200 to 300 receiving yards for the kid. So Leggett's going to be an L flex for me. Everybody else is a cone, and then Adam Thielen is about as strong of a strong start as you can get here. I feel phenomenal about Adam Thielen. Obviously, he has now done it in back-to-back weeks versus good competition, bad competition. Clearly, Bryce is number one guy in this offense, so you're getting him into your lineup. On the flip side, Dallas, as long as CeeDee Lamb is playing, he is also a strong start, a must start. We'll put him into the must start category. No one behind him I'm really interested in. They're kind of just like peppering random players around the team. Brandon Cooks is scoring a touchdown but catching 1 to 2 passes a game. Jalen Tolbert's really not involved whatsoever, and we'll move on from that. Next up, we got the New York Jets in Jacksonville. Jacksonville's passing defense is obviously abysmal. If Breece Hall is out again, I think it just opens up more targets for Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Both of them would end up being dub flexes for me. I just don't think the Jets have shown anything in the passing consistency of things to make me feel like both of them are really strong starts this week. So if they're your flex plays, I feel good about it, and I would put them there accordingly. Obviously, either of them are capable of having explosion days against Jacksonville in this terrible, terrible passing defense. As you could see, 24th in coverage rank per PFF, dead last at EPA per pass rank, and the 4th most fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. So it ain't good out there. But both of them are very, very, very startable at flex, and both of them obviously have the ceiling to put up top 15, top 12 numbers on a weekly basis, depending on who Aaron Rodgers decides that he wants to throw accurate passes to for that given week. For Jacksonville, I heard a stat yesterday that Mac Jones, who will be the starting quarterback for Jacksonville in this one, on passes of 20-plus air yards. So anytime he's thrown the ball deep this year, he's had 13 of those attempts. He is 0 for 13 with 3 interceptions. Not great. That scares the shit out of me for a dude like Brian Thomas. And listen, I know Brian Thomas has kind of like gotten it done with Mac Jones regardless. He's a really good player. And the matchup is okay. Like, on paper, it actually looks a lot worse. Like, fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position, New York the entire year and still remains the single toughest matchup for opposing fantasy players. Mac Jones under center. Brian Thomas Jr., I'm going to throw him into the dub flex category because if he's in my lineup and he's in my flex, I feel okay about it because I do think at the end of the game, when you look at the box scores, he's going to have the 7 to 8 targets. He's going to have 5 to 6 catches. He's capable of busting off a big play anytime the ball is in his hands. He is obviously a touchdown and a red zone threat at all times. Maybe Mac Jones fucks around and actually throws an accurate pass downfield, and it lands in Brian Thomas Jr.'s breadbasket. Otherwise, it could be a disappointing day for Brian Thomas Jr. But I'm just laying out the options for you. I'm laying out the analysis for you. You guys can make decisions. Mac Jones, not a good downfield passer, though, again, the way that they've been using Brian Thomas Jr., a lot of times is around the line of scrimmage. Let him make plays in the screen game. Let him make plays around the line of scrimmage. Use his yak ability, use his quickness, his shifty nature, his agility to make plays after the fact. So I don't feel great about it, but I don't feel terrible about it either. Baltimore, New York Giants. Baltimore, massive favorites on the road in New York, obviously. The overall concern here, I'm not starting any receiver outside of Zay Flowers, and I think you just have to start Zay Flowers, obviously. I think he's a strong start because the matchup is so good. Baltimore is going to just dominate the time of possession here. Obviously, the biggest concern is what happens when Baltimore gets up 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. Is it all just Derrick Henry getting 25 carries, 30 carries, Lamar Jackson 7 to 10 carries? Do they throw the ball more than 15, 17, 18 times? That becomes a massive concern, obviously. So because of that, we might have an entire second half where Zay Flowers gets 1 or 2 targets, or he's not even playing the fourth quarter there, okay? So that's a major concern. Because of that, actually, now that I'm talking through it, I'm going to throw Zay Flowers into the dub flex category because I think that's a very, very, very real concern. I don't think that's a concern that we're going too big brain on here where it's you're overthinking it. The matchup is great. It is, sure. But the reason that they're going to dominate is because Derrick Henry is going to go for $150 in the first half. Lamar Jackson's going to have no problem moving the ball without Dexter Lawrence on the defensive line. Their pass defense has been, not great. Their offensive line is banged up and dealing with a ton of injuries. Their offense overall is just a shit show. Tommy DeVito is under center now. So, when I look at Zay Flowers, he's going to move into the dub flex category for me, and I'm not playing anybody else in that receiver group. For the Giants, on the flip side, obviously the only player you're even thinking about in this matchup is Malik Neighbors. He's also going to be a dub flex for me, just based on the target volume, based on the skill player, based on the amount that they're probably going to have to pass the ball as more than 2 touchdown favorites in this one. And obviously Baltimore secondary has been straight trash, and they've given up a ton of fantasy points, 3rd most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. Their EPA per pass rank is 27th in the NFL. So on paper, good matchup for Malik. He's obviously dealing with some injuries, but the floor is just so high. I mean, there's been pretty much no ceiling since the first month of the season. Week 2, 28.7. Week 3, 28.2. Week 4, 23.1. At that point, we were okay, he's a top 5 fantasy wide receiver rest of season. Number 1 dynasty asset in all of fantasy football. Since then, though, the last 6 games, he's been over double-digit fantasy points in every single one of them. 14.9, 15.3, 12.4, 10.8, 14.9, 14.1. The targets are always between 6 and 9 targets there. So getting the volume, obviously getting the targets. He hasn't presented a ceiling. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3. Maybe that changes this year, but I feel comfortable enough with the floor that Malik's going to be a dub flex for me. And if I'm deciding between the two, Malik and Zay Flowers, I am going to lean towards Malik because of the game script and because of the floor that he provides. Moving down, we got Indy and we have Denver. Denver, obviously a very, very tough pass defense, especially playing in Mile High. They are the number 5 team in terms of PFF coverage rank. They are number 2 in EPA per pass rank. Indy's coming off the bye, so they are expected to get some of their offensive line back here, which is obviously huge for Richardson because he's been playing behind 3 rookies and getting a ton of pressure in his face consistently. Josh Downs was a limited participant in practice on Wednesday, so that is trending in a good direction. Not guaranteed to play, but I would say that puts him, being limited this early in the week, puts him on the better side of 50-50. That being said, it gets everything into a messy situation when you're looking at Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman. I would rather lean elsewhere. I'd rather look at other starting opportunities. If Josh Downs plays, I'm going to throw him into the L flex category. I think the rest of them are probably going to just be cones for me. I don't expect this to be a very high scoring environment game. I don't expect there to be a ton of points scored here. I am worried about Josh Downs missing multiple weeks, coming off of that, and just being a high floor guy who might go 4 for 50 in his return game. So I worry about his ceiling is basically what I'm getting at here. And if Josh Downs is playing, obviously all the other receivers take a huge step back in terms of volume and efficiency. So Downs, again, L flex, someone that I think is definitely flex worthy from what he's shown us this year, but I don't feel great about him. Pittman, has been pretty good recently, but I don't trust him if Downs is back in the lineup, especially not in this matchup. So those guys, Pittman, I guess you can throw into the L flex category, but definitely at the bottom tier of that. And then you're not starting A.D. Mitchell or Alec Pierce. On the flip side, Denver, Cortland Sutton is pretty much a must start. This is a great matchup for him. He's been red hot with Bo Nix, so he's going to go into the must start category. Devon Vele, I don't feel great about him. I'm going to throw him into the L-Flex category because I think he's definitely usable. Like, him and Bo Nix have showed real chemistry. He is starting to run the majority of the routes for this offense. You just never know what you're getting from Sean Payton. Any receiver in Denver not named Cortland Sutton has a really low floor on a week-to-week basis. Like, I think Vele should be good for 4 for 60. Maybe he scores a touchdown. But there's always the chance that, he starts to run out Troy Franklin, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Marvin Mims at, a 40 to 60% clip, and then Vele just disappears into nothing. So it's not someone I feel good about in my flex, but I do think he is worthy of consideration if you're in, a deep 12-team league or a 14-team league where you have a ton of starters and, it's that time of the year. A lot of injuries to wide receivers. So I'll throw them into that category there. New England and Arizona. New England, it's crazy. I just don't feel good about anybody in that receiver group. Pop Douglas has been a decent PPR floor play, but as crazy as it sounds, even in a good matchup versus Arizona, even in a game where I expect them to go over the total here of 45, I don't feel good about really anyone in the receiver group. I like Hunter Henry, and that's really about it. And obviously any of them could pop off on any given day, but the inconsistency that's being shown in terms of production from any receiver in New England, we're going straight cones here. We're going full traffic cones, redirecting traffic in every way possible here for the New England Patriots wide receivers, all straight down to the cone category. For Arizona, also a really good matchup. On the flip side, right, you look at New England's coverage rank, 22nd, EPA per pass, 26th, fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position, bottom 10 in the NFL. So we're looking at, on paper, a really good matchup for Arizona. I do think that they're probably going to try to control this game through the ground. I do think we're going to see a ton of James Conner in this one. I think we'll see a decent amount of Trey Benson and Amari DiMercato on the ground. Kyler Murray scrambling a little bit. So I don't know how voluminous Kyler Murray's pass attempt numbers will really be here. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been wildly inconsistent. So I'm going to throw him into the dub flex category. If he's my flex, if he's my wide receiver 4, or if he's my flex 1, flex 2, or whatever, I feel pretty good about him because he's shown that he can have really, really productive games. So he's going to be a dub flex. Michael Wilson will be in L flex for me. He's been wildly inconsistent, but he has shown production at times this year. Tampa Bay and the Los Angeles Chargers. All right, we've got Tampa Bay, 45.5 point total here. Underdogs, 3 points on the road. Great matchup for the Chargers. Not a great matchup for Tampa Bay in terms of the opposing defenses. Tampa Bay, you got Mike Evans as the must start. The only other guy you're really considering behind him, I think Shepard would be an L flex. I think McMillan would be an L flex as well. He's coming off the 2-touchdown game, but it was his first game really this year that he's shown anything. And he went 4 for 59. So if you take out those touchdowns, those easily could have went to any other receiver in that group. They went to McMillan. I'm a fan of him, of his game, coming out of Washington, whatever. But the way that this offense shapes up, it's you never really know what you're getting on a week-to-week basis. You know Evans will be involved. You know the running backs are going to be involved. Behind them, it's who knows what's going to happen. So McMillan is a dude who could easily put up a terrible, terrible floor play for you. Maybe he's getting more involved. I'm going to throw him into the L-Flex category, but he is very, very close to bordering on cone. And I actually would say the same thing for Sterling Shepard. So I would much prefer looking elsewhere. But if you need to, Baker as a dog tends to come through and put up points in these types of situations. So, you could find worse, but I would rather look elsewhere. On the flip side, you got the Chargers as favorites. The big name we're keeping an eye on is obviously Ladd McConkey. He was a limited participant in practice on Wednesday, which does definitely lean towards him making his return, which is huge for fantasy players. He's been a monster, for the last 6 weeks of the season, easily Herbert's number 1 target. If he's playing, he's immediately into the strong start category with a ton of ceiling here in a matchup versus Tampa Bay. Everybody else would fall back into the cone category. If he doesn't play, I kind of like Quentin Johnston. He hasn't really shown much, but he's still getting the opportunities. And I think without Will Disley, without Ladd McConkey, if he doesn't play, the targets have to go somewhere. So I would actually put Johnston as an L flex, bordering on the dub flex category. And I even think you could maybe label him as an L flex if Ladd does play, but definitely not bordering on the dub flex category if Ladd is in the lineup. Moving down to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Pittsburgh is going to be without George Pickens again, 97% certainty here. Really tough matchup. Both teams, I think, are going to go super, super ground heavy here. Pittsburgh, you're not starting any receiver with any sort of confidence. They're all going to be cones for me. Philadelphia, there's been a lot of discourse about A.J. Brown, and I think a lot of people are going to be like, yeah, it's the squeaky wheel narrative. Maybe. I also think they're 11-2, and like the way that their offense is running is perfect and they don't need to force throws more. So like, is all of the shit that's going on this week really going to force them to change their game plan? I hope not. Like, that would be dumb as fuck for them to start forcing throws when Saquon Barkley is the most most special weapon in the NFL at this point. So I don't know. A.J. Brown, wildly disappointing from a fantasy perspective, given what we thought it was going to be from like the start of the season. He's going to be a strong start for me. Like, you're obviously not going to sit A.J. Brown, but if I had to predict what his production is actually going to be, it's closer to strong start than it is must start. Devontae Smith is going to be a dub flex for me. I feel good about having him in my flex, although I'm not confident that the production comes because, again, you look at the bottom of the screen there, it is a lot of red, it is a lot of orange. It's a 42.5 point total. I think without George Pickens, like, is Russ even going to be able to, muster up 180 passing yards here against the number one coverage ranked team in the NFL right now in Philadelphia? If Pittsburgh is putting up 10 points, what is the incentive for Philadelphia to air it out, for them to throw the ball a lot, for them to take risks? Like, that's the one thing you don't need to do against this Pittsburgh team without George Pickens is take risks downfield for no reason, right? Just like hit them 1,000 sharp cuts, will get the job done. I just feel like this is going to be another game where Russ throws the ball 25 times and Jalen Hurts throws the ball sub 25 times as well, which is not great for any of the pass catchers here. Buffalo, Detroit. This is one where I just want to be like, everybody's a strong start. Everybody's a dub flex. Like, just go fucking have fun and put as many guys into your lineup as you want from these two teams. For Buffalo, Keon Coleman returned to a full practice on Wednesday. Dalton Kincaid returned to a full practice on Wednesday as well. So we have 4 legitimate pass-catching options here for you. Guys coming off of multi-week injuries are extremely scary for me. We have a rookie in Keon Coleman who started getting a little bit hot, but like it was a string of like 2 games. I don't want to overemphasize what he did in a 2-game sample size, one of which came on like a broken whatever. Keon Coleman's going to be an L flex for me, bordering on a cone this week. I'm not expecting much production from him, so I'm not looking to get him into my lineup. Cooper, I feel really good about, actually. Cooper was good last week. I think they left a lot of yards on the field as well. He had 230 or 260 air yards alone just last week, which was the highest total of any single game this entire season for any wide receiver. So I think Allen and Cooper are going to start cooking a little bit here. The matchup is phenomenal right now with a super banged up Detroit defense overall. So I think Buffalo's going to have no problem moving the ball down the field. So Cooper's going to be a dub flex for me. Shakir has been phenomenal. He's going to be a strong start for me. So I like both of those guys a lot in this one, in a game that's going to be fucking fireworks across the board. Detroit, you got Amon-Ra, who's, his production's actually not been great here over the last couple of weeks, but he's Amon-Ra St. Brown. We're not going to overthink it. He's a must start. Jameson Williams, I think, is a dub flex, so you can definitely get him into your lineup. We've had a little bit of an emergence from Mr. Tim Patrick scoring a couple touchdowns, but he's going to be, I'll throw him a little bit of respect. L flex, battling back from what he's battled back from and starting to make a little bit of a dent in this lineup here. He's going to be an L flex for me. Definitely don't want him actually in my fucking lineup, but I want to give him a little bit of respect. Next up, we got Sunday Night Football, Green Bay versus Seattle. Green Bay, 2.5 point favorites on the road here. With this receiver group, still really tough to get an actual read on. The matchup's not great. You see a lot of orange across the board here. Both defenses are probably underrated at this point. You don't think of this as a defensive matchup whatsoever. You definitely think of this more of like an air it out, quarterbacks that like to take risks, offensive game plan type beat here. But their defenses are pretty good. So I am not like overly enthusiastic about getting a lot of the Green Bay pass catchers in here. Jayden Reed, the targets have completely dipped off. The ceiling has completely dipped off. I still think I feel okay about having him in my lineup. Like, a lot of people that have Jayden Reed probably feel otherwise, considering the fucking donut he put up last week. I'm going to throw Jayden Reed into the dub flex category. I'm probably going to get some pushback on that. Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, I think they're going to go into the L flex category for me. Again, usable, but don't feel great about it. And I guess, based on that line of thinking, maybe I'm going to throw all 3 of the Green Bay wide receivers into the L flex category, because Jayden Reed, by my definition, someone you could flex, but I don't feel great about it. So, yes, he's going to go into the L flex category for me. If I had to rank him, it would still be Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, despite Watson's big game last week. This is just a team that very clearly wants to maneuver their offense through Joshua Jacobs. All right, that's how I would play that out. Dontavian Wicks is a cone for me. On the Seattle side of things, we have Lockett's a cone. Metcalf, at this point, we haven't seen the ceiling games, man. We are not seeing what we saw in the beginning of the year. Jay Alexander is back to a full practice, so we do expect him to be out there for this game. Because DK Metcalf is on the outside, that's probably where Jair Alexander will end up lining up. So a tough matchup for him. I'm going to put DK into the dub flex category because he's eligible to pop off any given moment there. JSN is an extremely strong start. He has kind of transitioned into the alpha in this offense somehow. Shout out to him. So JSN, strong start. DK is going to be into the dub flex category. Tyler Lockett is a cone for me. Monday Night Football, we got two games. We got Chicago at Minnesota. Minnesota almost touchdown favorites against this abysmal Chicago inconsistent team right now. For Minnesota, you have Justin Jefferson as a must start. You have Jordan Addison as, I'm going to put him into the strong start category, even coming off of last week, which was, an insane game for Jordan Addison. Got a lot of people into the playoffs if you started him. Chicago's still a tough defense on the passing side of things. As you can see, the second fewest fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. They're kind of falling apart, obviously. They are losing a little bit of momentum. They're losing a little bit of that, that midseason swag or energy that you saw as they were transitioning to a new coach and all that kind of stuff. They're just so inconsistent in every aspect of their team right now. They remind me a lot of Arizona. They remind me, they're like a younger version of Arizona that you just never know what you're going to get on a week-to-week basis. And in those situations, it's great that players have ceiling outcomes, but more often than not, you're going to start them in the weeks that they don't do well because literally no one in the fantasy community can really think for themselves. So it's every time someone has a good game, their entire opinion on the player changes, and they're like, no, now they're must-start players, and then they follow it with bad games and vice versa. So Chicago, look at the entire picture. You look at the inconsistency here. So when I'm looking at all their receivers in a tough matchup, this is going to be a game where Caleb needs to get the fucking ball out of his hands because they're going to blitz a ton. And he has been the worst quarterback in the NFL in terms of understanding the pressure around him. That dude, he's not getting pressured that often, but he's taking an insane number of sacks. The pressure to sack ratio on Caleb Williams this year is concerningly high. All you have to do is watch the games. If you watch any Caleb Williams games, it is a ton of him scrambling around when he probably doesn't need to and needing to get the fucking ball out of the it's great that he's athletic, and that's part of his game and part of what makes him so special, obviously, but there needs to be an internal clock that gets way fucking better this summer, okay? So I don't know what drills you need to incorporate, but it's scary for everybody involved. DJ Moore is getting a lot of volume, so DJ Moore is going to be a dub flex for me. The other two, I don't care that Rome just had a good game. Keenan Allen's been inconsistent as well. Everybody's been inconsistent. I would go DJ Moore, dub flex. I would go Keenan Allen and Rome, both L flexes, with Keenan Allen ranked above Rome. And I know everyone's like, what? Rome's coming on. Sure, whatever. We fucking heard that before. Keenan's been way more consistent than Rome has. I'm not looking at the one game that Rome just had and saying, now his season is turning. Not in this matchup, all right? Not up in here. Let's go Atlanta, Las Vegas. Atlanta, 4.5-point favies on the road in Las Vegas. Vegas, you're looking at Jacoby Myers, and that is it. They are likely playing with Aiden O'Connell was at yesterday's walkthrough. Antonio Pierce said the QB is feeling good, and we'll see how this week goes as far as him starting. So there's a real chance that Aiden O'Connell suits up. If that's the case, I think Jacoby Myers warrants, at worst, dub flex consideration here. You look at Atlanta's pass defense, 31st in EPA per pass, 31st in fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver. Same thing on the flip side. Vegas, 32nd in coverage rank, dead last per PFF, 30th in EPA per pass rank. So, you want to start the pass catchers that you can in this matchup, all right? So we're going to go Jacoby as a dub flex. We're going to go Drake London as, even with the way that Kirk Cousins is playing, my laptop is filthy. So I don't know why I'm doing this in the middle of filming. We are 40 minutes in, and I'm starting to completely lose my concentration here. We got one more game, Nick. We could do this. Let's go. Atlanta, Drake London, strong start, bordering on must start. Darnell Mooney, dub flex. Ray McLeod, L flex. Everyone that I named, super startable. If I am ranking those receivers, it's going to go Drake London, Jacoby Myers, Darnell Mooney, assuming Aiden O'Connell plays. If Aiden O'Connell does not play, Jacoby's going to fall into the L-flex category for me, and then that's going to be the rank accordingly. Like we saw Darnell Mooney get home last week. We saw them have good games despite Kirk Cousins not throwing touchdowns. He'll start to score some more touchdowns again, all right? Maybe we'll see Penix soon. Maybe we'll see Mikey Baby soon. There you have it, the wide receiver preview for Week 15. We've only got 2 more weeks of this, all right? So I'm trying to leave it all out on the table. I'm trying to leave it all out on the screen for y'all. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the button that looks like that down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new here and want some help throughout the rest of your playoffs. Go check out yesterday's running back version of this video, and I will see y'all Saturday for the private Q&A. Sign up to be a Big Dog member if you want in on that and you want your sit starts answered for this weekend's playoff. BDGE.co is where you can sign up to be a Big Dog member, or if you go download Underdog Fantasy and use our code BDGE, when you deposit $10 or more, you get the deposit bonus, you'll get that free square for tonight's game, and you will automatically get access for the remainder of the season to the Big Dog membership. I love you. I'm out. Smoochies. Hoodies available on BDG.shop.